The January wave of 2025 LEGO Harry Potter sets has given us one of the darkest and most violent LEGO sets of all time. Today I'll be taking a look at all 6 of the latest LEGO Harry Potter sets and showing you what our current most beautiful and detailed Hogwarts is looking like. Starting off small, we have one of the most iconic scenes out of the first movie represented in the Hogwarts Castle Charms class set. This is set 76442 and retails for $20 US, 30 Australian and 18 Great British pounds. It has 204 pieces and 3 minifigures and is meant to combine with set 76435, the Hogwarts Great Hall. First up, we have Professor Flitwick, who actually has a brand new torso print despite being the third version of this exact same minifigure that we have now gotten. He comes with a really short beard and overall is a pretty solid minifigure. The set also comes along with Hermione Granger and of course Ron Weasley, both of which are in their very standard Hogwarts uniform type of looks that we have seen more and more over the last couple of years. As for the set itself, this thing is absolutely tiny. Now the way it's supposed to work with the Hogwarts Great Hall is that it's supposed to slot into this tiny little section right in the middle in the dungeons, and for that I'm very glad that it is the shape it is. However, even when you open it up, it does feel just a tiny little bit small, but it is jam-packed full of details despite this. Along the back wall are these stickered panels that have a bunch of references to a variety of different spells featured throughout the Harry Potter franchise, as well as the names of all 4 Marauders etched in on the wall, which I absolutely love. Some other details include these stickered panel pieces in order to replicate a fireplace, which I think works really well and is a great use of space. And then alongside that, you also have a giant pile of books for Flitwick to stand on, as well as 2 small desks for Ron and Hermione. And even though there's not a ton of space here, LEGO still managed to fit in a nice little play feature in the form of the Wingardium Leviosa spell. A tiny white feather is attached to a bunch of clear pieces, and if you push down on the back, the feather will float up in the air right in front of Flitwick. But whilst Ron and Hermione also come with feathers in this set, that play feature doesn't exactly exist for them. Along the walls of the classroom, there were also these really nice stickered Hogwarts crest panels, and then finally there is a brand new printed piece sat on top of Ron and Hermione's desks, instructing the students how to cast the Wingardium Leviosa spell. This set's design is almost identical to that of last year's potions classroom, being that the whole thing can just open up and actually interact with the greater Hogwarts system. However, these are both meant to fit in 2 very different size slots inside the Great Hall. Now, whilst I feel like Charms does work really nicely in this small classroom shape, there is a large part of me that wishes that it was in this bigger format instead, just to give you a little bit more space to move around with, especially when the whole thing is condensed up. The potions classroom is quite literally double the size of the Charms class, and when it is folded up, it can really show, as you can look down on top of this potions classroom and still have a lot of room to move, whereas in the Charms classroom, everything is quite literally jam-packed on top of each other and there is no space to interact with at all. The small compact shape though does make it really easy to display on a shelf and also provides a really nice backdrop for dollhouse style play. For 20 bucks, it's pretty neat. However, unless you're a massive fan of the Philosopher's Stone, I feel like you could probably skip this set and not really be missing out on much. Especially when for an extra $5, you could purchase the Hogwarts Classroom Dueling Club set, which I believe is pretty much a perfect set. We're gonna revisit the Dueling Club in the shape of set 76441. It retails for $25 US, 40 Australian and 20 Great British pounds and has 158 pieces with 4 minifigures. Kicking off our minifigures, we have an open-robed version of Harry Potter and the very standard Draco Malfoy minifigure. We also have the return of a very perfect version of Professor Snape that comes along with his really nice arm printing and coattails detailing. But the main star of the show, of course, is Gilderoy Lockhart in a completely brand new outfit along with a fantastic looking face print. He features a new rubber cape, which is typically used for Batman and in my opinion does look a little bit odd, especially because it's got those Batman peaks that you would typically see. However, the shape of it I do think works really well for Lockhart, but personally I would have preferred just to see a regular fabric piece used here. But despite being $5 more, this set really does not feel like it, and I think part of that is from having an extra minifigure included, alongside the fact that it's also got some really nice printed pieces on the Dueling Club platform. This set has a tiny little fireplace build attached to the side, which is where they decided to include the little Hogwarts portrait, but to me this kind of just feels like an advent calendar build and is really secondary and not really something I think of a lot because this dueling platform is really what we're here for. Despite this looking a lot smaller than the Charms classroom, this thing is absolutely jam-packed full with pieces, which gives us a very fun play feature. As if you push in on the staircases, the minifigures can actually duel each other and send each other flying off, which I think is really fun. And since this scene is quite literally titled Dueling Club, LEGO reintroduced these dueling one pieces back into this set, which is super neat and actually includes a recoloring in the form of this dark brown one. Additionally, this set comes with a tiny little snake piece so that Draco can cast Serpent Sortie tier, and overall I feel like this is almost the perfect set. To me, it's just the price point that really hurts this set. When you put it side by side with the Charms Classroom, it makes it really hard to make the Dueling Club feel like it is actually worth the money and a set of value. And whilst I think it's almost perfect because you have no stickers, 4 minifigures, and a really accurate platform that can also interact with the Hogwarts castle, it just doesn't feel like a lot of stuff compared to the Charms Classroom being completely open. So whilst LEGO is asking a lot from you to pay $25 US for this tiny set, I definitely feel like this is a better pick overall than that Charms Classroom is. Now our next set is one of very few Deathly Hallows sets and is probably one of the more strange Harry Potter sets in my opinion. This is set 76443, Hagrid and Harry's Motorcycle Ride. It retails for $50 US, 80 Australian and 45 Great British pounds and contains 617 pieces. Now a fun fact is I recently completed a Harry Potter reread and rewatch of the entire franchise, so needless to say, a lot of the deaths in the Deathly Hallows are still feeling a little fresh to me, and Hedwig's is no exception. So the fact that it was included in this set is interesting, to say the least. And when it comes to the Deathly Hallows, I feel like there was a ton of content to pick out of that didn't include a set that looks like this. But with that in mind, this set honestly surprised me quite a lot. Here's the thing, I don't think any of us were expecting this set when we were hoping for a Sirius's Motorbike / Hagrid's Motorbike set. However, in person, this set is actually way better than this box makes it look. Would I have bought this set though if I wasn't planning on reviewing every Harry Potter set? Absolutely not. This would have been a complete hard pass, so part of me is glad I was going to look at them and review them all because, you know, I did get quite a bit of enjoyment out of this. However, I don't think there will ever be a day where I don't look at Harry Potter's face and think it looks incredibly goofy. But this set is made for a demographic that probably isn't buying a ton of Harry Potter sets. They're looking for one thing that is going to look really cute on their shelf up against their Harry Potter books. Because when you stack the set up against the books like this, suddenly it becomes far more appealing and actually looks like it belongs. But the reason this set surprised me purely came down to the actual physical build of this set. I did not expect you to be able to completely take off Hagrid from the motorbike, which I think is really cool. Not that I know what I would want to do with this random sitting Hagrid. I guess he could sit on the books. Wouldn't recommend it though. And then that leaves you with a really nice build of Sirius's motorbike and of course the little sidecar. I think what really throws me off with this set is just Harry's face. It looks so goofy and I think a large part of that is because he doesn't have a smile, but I think that probably would have made it worse, so I'm glad that it wasn't included. His little curvy noodle arms as well are a tiny bit goofy because Hedwig overall I think looks absolutely adorable, and so does the sidecar build, because the reality is there are only two downsides to this set. The first is Harry's absolutely goofy face, and the second is you can only really display it from this one angle, otherwise it doesn't look that great. Like you can't really turn it around because then you can't see Harry, and face on I feel like it doesn't work either. Like you've really just got to have it at this kind of 45-degree angle. Because I really like the character build for Hagrid. I love that his arms can move. I love that he comes with these giant big fig hands and his head can move up and down. His coattail can even flap. The bike is incredible. The sidecar build is incredible. I'm not really one ever for buildable characters, but this really shocked me. And of course I would have preferred a minifigure scale version of Hagrid's motorbike that he could actually sit on in his big fig form, but the reality is not everything is about me, and there are other types of Harry Potter fans that are probably really going to enjoy this set. But that being said, I do actually like this set, I hate to admit it. Now, as we head back to Hogwarts, this set is usually typically way more up my alley. But for a time period where I thought we were really going to be expanding upon Hogwarts Castle, I feel like this was an interesting set choice to do. This is set 76447, Hogwarts Castle Flying Lessons. It retails for $80 US, 130 Australian and 70 Great British pounds with 651 pieces and 6 minifigures. First up is Madam Hooch, who comes along with a really lovely torso and face print, and luckily, unlike Lockhart, actually has a really nice stiff fabric cape. We then have a closed robe version of Harry this time around, which is really cute, as well as that same version of Draco Malfoy from the Dueling Club. But it's not a flying lesson scene without Neville Longbottom, who has the open robe version of the Gryffindor torso and comes along with this lovely, gorgeous printed Remember-All piece. Then to round out the student body, we also have Oliver Wood in this set, who has finally made a return after a very long hiatus. However, I feel like they just went with the most basic version for him. He just has a very standard standard Lego face print, which I feel like doesn't really work for the character of Oliver Wood here. However, I really like the print of his black sweater. And last but certainly not least, we have Professor McGonagall, who is a very big downgrade from our previous versions of her. This time around, she doesn't have any skirt printing nor arm printing, which is not something that I'm typically used to with our McGonagall figures, as I feel like recently they have just been absolutely perfect. So it's a little bit disappointing in that regard, but I do believe that this is a brand new torso print, so I'll give her points for that. The release of a flying lesson set now to me is really interesting because we're in this era of creating this absolutely gorgeous exterior looking Hogwarts castle set with beautifully detailed interiors, and I thought we were going to get a piece that would like directly connect to that. And whilst this does technically work and interact with this Hogwarts castle system by including a couple of clips on the side here, this building just feels so separate from the rest of Hogwarts that it doesn't really make sense to me. Because the way I view the flying lesson is much like the Owlery set from last year, where these just kind of stand separately from the rest of Hogwarts, whereas things like the astronomy tower and the clock tower and other various Hogwarts structures or bridges, I feel like connect with each other to make that iconic Hogwarts silhouette that we all know and love. Now, of course, there is the aspect to this that the first two movies do feel a little bit more distant in terms of Hogwarts layout and setup in a lot of areas compared to the rest of the franchise, with the flying lesson being a really clear indicator of that. So if you're going to do the flying lesson scene, it kind of does need to feel a little bit separate to me. It's one of those situations where I feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, but that being said, I really like this version of the flying lesson set, especially when the entire structure is completely closed up like this. Alternatively, it can completely open up to make this really big wall of castle with a couple of different sections to it, being this really large tower, this middle bridge section with an archway, and this tiny little tower with a couple of small rooms. The hinges that allow it to entirely close up allow for a little bit of customization when it comes to the actual placement and structure of this building, allowing for a lot of dimension rather than just a 2D wall of a set. Inside the main structure, we have a couple of those small rooms that are the exact same size as our Charms classroom from earlier. The first one on the bottom is just a very simple one, which contains a variety of different Quidditch equipment, including a beater's helmet, a nice dark red quaffle, 2 grey studs to represent the bludgers, the golden snitch, and of course 2 beater's bats. There's a little bit of floor space, however, because the walls are so short in order to work with this building and still allow these beautiful archways to stay open, it does just feel like it was kind of thrown in there to fill it up rather than feeling like a complete space. And further up, we actually have a scene from the Chamber of Secrets, which is the Transfiguration classroom. And compared to the Charms classroom, this thing is absolutely tiny. Now, it does include all of the elements that you would want from a classroom, being a couple of spaces for students to sit at, as well as some tiny little desks. But because the area for McGonagall to actually stand is so small, it does just feel a little bit weak to me. One thing though that I really like about this tiny build is that there is this turning platform that allows you to turn an animal into a water goblet, just like in the Chamber of Secrets. Next up is this tiny little wall area, which has a couple of clear pieces with some clips on them so that you can attach the brooms to one another and have Harry and Draco, or Draco and Neville, or any variety of characters really flying around. Like the Charms classroom too, if you reach on the back of the wall, there is a tiny piece that you can push down, allowing for a tiny bit of movement and flight action for these. And there is a similar feature at the very top of this tower too, with another clear piece, but this time this one just spins around. Next up is a tiny archway with a couple of little torches, and then finally is this smaller tower. At the very bottom, we have the Quidditch trophy room, accompanied by our 2 portrait tiles in this set, which unfortunately for me, I ended up getting 2 of the exact same one. But there are a couple of gold cones to represent some trophies, as well as a really nice stickered shield piece depicting the iconic James Potter Seeker plaque that we see in the first movie. Moving up a level, I like to believe that this is McGonagall's office. It also comes with one of our typical Wingardium Leviosa printed 1x2 tiles, which is really neat, as well as a quill and a lamppost, and a nice little window to watch Harry catch the Remembrall out of. At the very top is the statue that Neville gets stuck on at the end of the flying sequence, which I think is a pretty neat inclusion. And overall, this is a pretty solid set. It is definitely not my top pick when it comes to a Hogwarts castle set, but I feel like if you like the Philosopher's Stone and you really like the flying lesson scene, or just want a couple of these characters, or even another Hogwarts castle building, it's a pretty solid set overall. Besides McGonagall's printing and that tiny little Quidditch equipment section, I feel like there is really not a lot wrong with this set. Overall, I do quite enjoy it. Next up, let's talk about the set that I have been anticipating the absolute most, and that is our first ever version of a Malfoy Manor set. If you weren't aware, there were early drafts for a concept of a Malfoy Manor playset back in 2011, but it never saw the light of day, and finally we have gotten one, and this set is absolutely incredible to me. This is set 76453 Malfoy Manor and retails for $150 US, 250 Australian, and 135 Great British pounds. pieces. It has 1,601 pieces and comes along with 9 minifigures. First up is the return of our Narcissa Malfoy minifigure, and I am so glad that they kept her hairpiece from the original one, and I love the new torso print on her. However, I'm really confused as to why they gave her legs instead of a dress piece, because I feel like Narcissa is never shown wearing pants. Her head print is a pretty standard Lego one and is nothing special, but I do think it does work. However, she is missing her iconic really sharp cheekbones. Next up is Lucius Malfoy, who comes with, for the first time ever, a custom and brand new face print, and it looks absolutely incredible. I think it is such a big improvement on the last one, even though overall the facial expression is pretty much the same, except for the alternate face, which has a very slight smile to it. Then we also have Draco Malfoy included in this set. However, he has actually had a little bit of a downgrade, as they've gone back to the original face they used for him rather than his custom made one that they've used the last couple of times. It is so disappointing because that custom Draco face looked so much better and really suited him. I just feel like the black thick eyebrows do not work very well for his hair, and it's just too grumpy in my opinion. And then lastly, to complete out the Malfoy family, we have Bellatrix Lestrange, who again, just like Lucius, has a brand new custom face print, and this is such a major improvement on Bellatrix, who usually would just get an old face print or lack some leg printing, and this Bellatrix really went all out. This is what I have been waiting for this character. I mean, Bellatrix is so menacing and evil and cunning, and I feel like this face print really depicts it. This set also comes along with a version of Lord Voldemort, who to me just feels really out of place in this set. I would have much preferred to have seen Ron Weasley instead of Lord Voldemort, especially because he has this really weird smirking face print that to me just doesn't say Dark Lord. I don't recall Voldemort ever making this face, and I only watched the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 in the last 2 days, so this to me just feels really off. And I guess it makes sense that him and Nagini are here since they are shown in Malfoy Manor at some point in the Deathly Hallows, but I feel like Ron Weasley should have been in this set instead. Now, Harry in this set has an absolutely incredible looking face print with the stinging jinx placed on his face in order to create Vernon Dudley. It is so well done, and I also love the extra texture given on his torso print to give it a little bit more of a rougher look, just to show what they have gone through in this movie. To go along with him, we have Hermione, who just has her standard face print, which I would have loved to have seen one that was a little bit more in distress, especially given the context of this scene. But Hermione's torso print overall is really nice, and I think this is a great version of her character. Next up is Luna Lovegood, who has an absolutely fantastic blonde recoloring of a Lego Friends piece for her hair. Luna comes with a brand new torso print, which I think is really accurate to the film. However, much like Draco, they have gone back and just given her a completely different head rather than the standard Luna Lovegood head. And last but certainly not least, we have everyone's favorite character, Dobby, who comes complete with his little boots. I personally thought they looked a little bit more red in the movie than these ones do, but I feel like they just went with this piece because it already existed. And look, I'll take it because they've given him a brand new torso print. I'm pretty sure he also has a brand new face print as well. Overall, the minifigure selection to me feels okay. I mean, I'm glad that there are a lot of minifigure inclusions in here. There are some great aspects, but overall, I'm left wanting more. Ron Weasley being cut is such a detriment to this set, and he just keeps getting left out of Deathly Hallows stuff, and I really wish he would make appearances in sets again as an adult. But minifigures aside, I think this set is absolutely fantastic. It comes along with two little side builds, being the front gates to Malfoy Manor, complete with these absolutely gorgeous light bluish grey gargoyles on the top, and this tiny little statue of some birds, or at least I think it's a statue. They could just be real life birds, but that doesn't matter because the actual Malfoy Manor playset is really what is my favorite part about this. The playset style of a set works really well for this model, and I absolutely love the scale that they've gone through because it pretty much gives us the iconic Malfoy Manor silhouette without costing an absolute fortune. Now, even though the set is quite tall and big, it is very narrow, which personally I don't mind because I feel like it makes it a little bit easier to display on a shelf and includes enough elements in this set that I feel like the interior is substantial enough, but that is mostly because it allows for a lot of different areas of dollhouse style play. On the bottom, you get 2 dungeon cells, and the real main interesting part of this bottom floor has to be the kitchen to me. I mean, you can lock up a couple of the characters, but this tiny little lobster and some kitchen equipment and just references to Dobby being there as the Malfoy servant is really fun to me. On this level as well, there are 2 green staircases which can actually swivel around and tuck away, or you can swivel them in front to lead you up into the main area, which is the Grand Malfoy Ballroom. But before we get to that, on one side there is a tiny little Slytherin bed, which we assume to be Malfoy's bedroom, and on the other side side, there is a tiny little toilet. On the top floor, there is a nice black armchair, which is seen actually in a couple of the promotional images of the Malfoy family for the Deathly Hallows. And then on the other side, to complete things off, there is a tiny little organ build. But going back to this main ballroom, this is such a nice little area for me, and just given how little the space was, I feel like is done so well. In this set, you can actually depict the two main scenes of Malfoy Manor from the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which I think is really neat, starting off with the Death Eater meeting from the very opening of the film. Each chair and the table is only attached by a couple of studs, so it is really easy to remove everything and give you just a big, grand, open ballroom. On the floor of this room as well is a really nice little Easter egg of the Dark Mark that is outlined in a bunch of black tiles, which is such a fun reference and really well done. And because of the way that the table and chairs work, even if you remove everything and have this open ballroom, there are still a couple of studs that you can attach the minifigures to in order to replicate the dueling scenes from the end of the first movie. On the back wall, this section is decorated with a nice little fireplace build, as well as two giant stickered portraits, which do look really nice, even if they're not completely in scale. And this entire section is actually topped off with one of the darkest yet funniest play features I have yet to see in a LEGO set. As you might notice that this set includes a little chandelier, which if you pull this little Technic pin at the front, the chandelier will come crashing down and might accidentally knock, maim, or seriously injure one of your minifigures. LEGO very easily could have cut a lot of corners and left out a lot of elements of the Malfoy Manor scenes that I feel like make this scene so memorable and so interesting to the viewers, and I am so glad that they kept it all in and gave the people what they want, no matter how dark or violent or depressing this scene might be. As a collector who loves a good playset and wants to put them on a shelf, this set ticks every single box that I wanted it to. Of course, besides that minifigure department, I think the build is fantastic. The play opportunity here is incredible, and this is something that I would have absolutely eaten up as a child if it came out in that 2011 wave. And it kind of makes me sad that it didn't, because I know that I would have gotten so many hours of play with this thing. If you were gonna buy one set from this wave, I really feel like it has to be Malfoy Manor. You cannot go wrong, and the fact that it is something completely fresh for the LEGO Harry Potter theme too is a massive bonus here. And speaking of wanting to display sets on a shelf, the last set that we're going to be taking a look at is this micro scale version of Diagon Alley. Like Hagrid's motorbike, if I wasn't planning on reviewing these sets, I probably wouldn't have picked this one up, and that is simply because I absolutely adore the large scale Diagon Alley sets as is. I think that system is absolutely perfect, and to me, I have a really sentimental attachment since the original Diagon Alley was always my white whale. Then alongside of that, we've had a micro scale Diagon Alley promo before, and then recently LEGO has been making playset versions of all of the shops. So to get a micro scale version, to me it just kind of feels like a little bit of an overload of Diagon Alley. However, this is vastly different to what I was expecting. This set also made me very nervous at first because that nanoscale Hogwarts castle that recently came out, I personally had such an awful experience with the build. I did not enjoy it. I thought it was really, really dense and very, very fiddly, and I thought that was just because it was micro scale. Turns out it was just because all of the pieces were jam-packed so tightly together, which with this set, I did not feel the same way. This is set 76444, Diagon Alley Wizarding Shops. It retails for $200 US, 300 Australian, and 170 Great British pounds. It has 2,750 pieces and comes along with 12 different microfigures. Now, straight off the bat, one thing I really like about this set is how they divided it into several different sections, which makes it really easy to transport and also allows a little bit of customization with this set. Firstly, there are these two kind of larger end sections, and then there are 3 different pieces in the middle, with Gringotts being its own main one. So you can either have Gringotts being the center of one's long strip, or attach everything to the front to make a really long alley. Now, like I mentioned, the build process of this set to me was far more enjoyable than that of the nanoscale Hogwarts castle, and I think part of it is because of just how they broke it up, as each of these little sections is its own instruction booklet, giving you 5 in total. All of the buildings featured very similar techniques, and there was a couple of large elements mixed in there, and overall I did have a pretty enjoyable time doing it, as I was watching the Deathly Hallows Part 2 at the time and just felt very immersed in Harry Potter. Now, as much as I love the large modular Diagon Alley street buildings and even the playset ones, there is a real appeal to having everything shrunk down so tiny, because even though it is quite long, this is a lot more bearable and easy to fit on some sort of shelf or platform. It's not very deep, and you can display it in 2 ways, or even cut out a couple of sections and buildings if you really wanted to make it just a tiny bit smaller. The micro figures as well are a really nice touch, although it is a little bit hard at times for me personally to figure out which character is which. Out of this whole street, there are a couple buildings that really stand out to me when it comes to detail. I mean, the first is Gringotts. It is just so beautiful and so grand and reminds me a lot as well of the mini Gringotts model that the designers made before they actually made the larger Gringotts set. Another one is Flourish and Blots. I absolutely love how this looks in a miniature version, and the same deal with Madame Malkin's because it looks so closely to the playset version that we got recently, which I feel like is really just a credit to the designer's work as Harry Potter as a theme. And much like the larger Diagon Alley, they did have a whole section that is built up of kind of cobblestone at the very front, and then they use those dark tan pieces in order to create the walkway of Diagon Alley. Scattered throughout, there are also a ton of tiny little black lamppost builds, which I think are really cute to just kind of tie the whole street front together. And similarly to the nanoscale Hogwarts castle, and likewise a lot of LEGO architecture sets, you even get a tiny little printed tile that says Diagon Alley on it to complete it. One thing about this set that kind of gets me excited but also upsets me at the same time though is the inclusion of the leaky cauldron on the end. I am very glad that this finally got featured in LEGO form. However, it is really sad to look at and just think about the fact that this is the first time we have properly seen the leaky cauldron, as I am still awaiting some sort of set, whether it be a play set or a large modular building, and I'm hoping that this set kind of hints at things to come. Now, whilst this Diagon Alley street does very closely resemble the larger modular buildings, it also feels vastly different in many ways. A main one for me being Quality Quidditch Supplies, where they completely revamped the color scheme of it and just refreshed it a little bit, and also just the scale of things. I ended up making some tiny little micro Diagon Alley builds a while back. In fact, if you want to build your own, there are instructions linked at the end of this video. But for those, I did them at such a smaller scale and also tried to make a replica of exactly that larger Diagon Alley set, whereas this set is definitely a more fleshed out version and also a much larger version. Even when you compare it to things like the Diagon Alley promo that was released a couple of years ago, this is so much bigger and so much more detailed. Like a lot of micro scale sets, because it is so densely packed, it does feel like it's pushing it a lot when it comes to value for money. When I look at this set and then I think about how much I actually spent on this thing, it is a little bit of a stretch. In fact, it's a very big stretch. $200 US for this is a lot to ask for, especially when I look at Malfoy Manor for 150. That feels way more worth my money than this set to me. So that is the entirety of the January 2025 LEGO Harry Potter wave. This by far is the most fleshed out winter Harry Potter wave that we have ever had, and also one of the waves that I feel like has the most variety. I mean, the fact that we got 2 Deathly Hallows sets at once is absolutely incredible for me, considering just how long it took for us to get some in general. My top picks from this wave though are definitely Malfoy Manor and the Dueling Club. I just feel like they are some of the best Harry Potter sets that I have seen in a very long time, and you would be kicking yourself, I feel like, if you didn't pick these up. The rest is simply up to personal preference, because I don't necessarily think they are bad sets, but things like Hagrid's Motorbike or Diagon Alley I feel like are really targeting a very specific type of person. But if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel down below. And if you want to watch individual reviews on these sets, you can find them on my second channel called Holly on Air. But until next time, I'll see you later.